The glass didn't just break, it exploded. It's June 6th, 1944. The sky over France is a chaotic light show of tracers and flak. You're falling through the darkness at 24 feet per second, praying your chute doesn't turn into a Roman candle. You're Henry Langrehr, a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne, and you're miles off target. The ground rushes up to meet you, not a field nor a beach, but the sharp angular roof of a greenhouse in the town of Saint-Mary-Glisse. You crash through. Shards of glass slice the air like shrapnel. You land in a heap of vegetation and debris, stunned, bleeding, but miraculously alive. Most stories of World War II would stop here. They tell you about the glory of D-Day, the liberation of towns, the candy bars thrown to expectant children. But for Henry Langrehr, crashing through that roof wasn't the end of the story. It was just the opening act of a nightmare that would take him from the hedgerows of Normandy to the slave labor mines of Czechoslovakia, and finally into a desperate feral struggle for survival deep behind enemy lines. This isn't the clean-cut war you've seen in the movies. This is the war of the forgotten. Welcome to World War II Obscura. To understand what Henry went through, you have to understand the expectations of 1944. American paratroopers were elite. They were the well-fed, well-trained, and possessed the swagger that came from knowing they were the spearhead of the liberation. They expected combat. They expected death, but they never expected to be turned into slaves. Henry's story is unique because it bridges two distinct horrors in the Second World War: the visceral, high-octane combat of the Western Front and the industrialized, slow-motion murder of the Holocaust in the East. He's one of the few Americans who saw both. The story forces us to ask a simple, terrifying question. When you strip a soldier of his weapon, his unit, his uniform, and his dignity, what is left? Henry Langrehr found out what remains is not a hero, but a survivor, and a survivor will do whatever it takes. In the days immediately following his greenhouse crash, Henry didn't have time to shake glass out of his boots. The battle for Normandy was a meat grinder. The hedgerows, massive ancient walls of earth and root, turned every field into a fortress. For weeks, Henry fights. It's brutal close-quarters stuff. You can't see the enemy until they're on top of you. Mortars rain down on open fields. Friends die mid-sentence. One moment you're sharing a cigarette, the next you're holding a buddy as the life drains out of him. Henry saw it all. He holds a dying friend named Bill who whispers the Lord's Prayer as he bleeds out in the dirt. It's a trauma that hardens him, preparing him for what's coming. On June 29th, his luck runs out. Henry's unit is holding a position near a bridge when the German counterattack hits. It's overwhelming. A tank shell explodes nearby. Shrapnel tears into Henry's back. The world flashes bright white, then fades to black. When he wakes up, the rifle in his hands is gone. He's looking at the barrels of German Mausers. The transition is violent and absolute. 1 minute you're an American liberator, the next you're cargo. They load Henry and other prisoners into boxcars. We've all heard the stories of the cattle cars, but Henry lived it. Jammed in so tight no one could sit. The heat was stifling. There's no water. There's no toilet. Men lose their minds in the darkness. The air turns thick with the smell of sweat, fear, and excrement. When the doors finally grind open, they aren't in a standard POW camp. They're in the outer ring of something much worse. Henry looks through the barbed wire. He sees figures that look less like people and more like skeletons wrapped in rags. He sees the guards beating them, shooting them for stumbling. He sees bodies, not the fallen soldiers he's used to, men killed in the heat of battle. These were piles of emaciated corpses, stacked as he would later describe, like cords of wood. He's witnessing the machinery of the Holocaust. For a kid from Iowa, this vision of Auschwitz is beyond comprehension. It's a shock to the system that shatters any illusion of civilized warfare. He watches the smoke rise from the crematoriums and realizes that in this place, human life has no value. But the Germans have a use for him. They don't want to waste him in the ovens. They plan to work him to death. After weeks in an annex to Auschwitz and a brief time of processing at Stalag 12A, they move him to a slave labor camp in Czechoslovakia. Here they force him into the suffocating depths of a bituminous coal mine. It's a descent into a new kind of underworld where the conditions are medieval, a brutal regression from the modern warfare he trained for. He's handed a pickaxe, heavy, blunt, and cold, and sent into the crushing dark. The air down there isn't just stale, it's aggressive, choked with a thick, oily coal dust that clings to the skin like a second shadow, coats the lungs, and turns every spit into a glob of black sludge. Breathing becomes a labor, the constant reminder of the earth pressing down from above. Survival here is measured in calories and cruelty. The food is a cruel joke, a watery soup that smells of rot and offers barely enough energy to keep a heart beating, let alone swing a pickaxe for 12 hours. The guards are sadistic, men who've lost their humanity, or perhaps never had it. They aren't just doing a job. They seem to feed on the misery. A rifle butt to the ribs is a morning greeting. A moment's hesitation is met with a boot to the face. Henry labors alongside a ghost army of other POWs, Russians, Poles, Brits, all strips of their nations, united only by the coal dust and the misery. In this void, Henry realizes the brutal math of his existence. He can feel his body consuming itself, muscle withering away to feed the vital organs. He knows that if he stays in the mine, he dies. He will become just another piece of cordwood stacked by the wire. But he finds a spark of resistance in a friend, a fellow American he calls Tim. They whisper in the dark, their voices low and desperate. They don't talk about home or girls or the cars they left behind. They talk about the only thing that matters to them, running. It's a suicide pact. The camp commander has made it clear. No one escapes from this camp. Those who try are brought back and executed in front of formation. But Henry looks at his hands blackened by coal, shaking with weakness, and decides that a bullet in the back is better than dying by inches in the dark. The opportunity comes on a march, a moment of confusion, a guard looking the wrong way, and Henry and Tim bolt. They hit the tree line before the shouting starts. They run until their lungs burn, crashing through the underbrush, desperate to put distance between themselves and the dogs. They are deep in enemy territory, unarmed, starving, and wearing distinct uniforms. They find a barn on the outskirts of a village. It's a classic sanctuary, straw, warmth, a place to hide. But in war, safety is a mirage. They burrow into the hayloft, hearts hammering against their ribs. They wait. Then they hear the sound of boots and German voices. It's not the Wehrmacht, it's the Volkssturm, the people's militia. Old men and boys, but still armed with deadly weapons. They enter the barn. They begin to search. Henry watches through the cracks in the floorboards. He sees the soldier has found Tim. The crack of a rifle is deafening in the enclosed space. Tim falls. There's no time to mourn, no time to think. The soldier turns, spotting Henry. This is the moment. This is the moment where history becomes personal. It's not armies clashing on a map. It's two men in a dusty barn, and only one gets to leave. Henry didn't have a gun. He had a 2x4 plank of wood. He leapt. The struggle is primal. It's messy. The soldier is fighting for his life, and so is Henry. There's no choreography here. It's grappling, striking, grasping for air. Henry manages to hit the soldier, stunning him. He grabs the German's weapon, a pistol. The soldier is down, but Henry knows he can't leave a witness. The moral lines of his native Iowa don't exist in this barn. He pulls the trigger. Henry Langrehr stands over the body. His friend is dead, and so is his enemy, and he is alone. He takes the pistol, he takes the ammo, and he runs. For the next 2 weeks, Henry Langrehr becomes a ghost. He travels by night, guided by the stars, moving westward. He avoids roads. He avoids people. He's hallucinating from hunger. His feet are raw. The cold is a physical weight pressing down on him. One night, he stumbles into his cemetery, so dehydrated that his tongue is swelling at his mouth. He needs water, but the streams are all frozen or guarded. He looks at the graves. Fresh flowers sit in vases by the headstones. Henry kneels in the dirt. He takes the vases, tips them back, and drinks the stagnant, putrid water that the flowers have been sitting in. It tastes like rot and death, but it keeps him alive for one more night. He keeps moving. He has to do whatever it takes. He encounters a building with 4 Volkssturm inside. He's weak, he's outnumbered, but he has the element of surprise and that captured pistol. He entered the room and he didn't hesitate. He killed them all. He takes their food, some cheese, and vanishes back into the night. This is what the war has distilled into, a mechanism of survival. Finally, he sees it. Not a German truck, not a militia patrol, but an American Jeep. He stumbles out of the tree line. The soldiers raise their weapons, seeing a filthy, emaciated figure in rags. He raises his hand and speaks English. The war for Henry Langrehr ends not with a parade, but with a collapse into the arms of his countrymen. Henry survived. He made it home. He married his sweetheart Arlene, who had waited for him, building components for machine guns in a factory while he was missing. They built a house. They built a life. But you don't walk out of a greenhouse, a death camp, a coal mine, and a barn fight without carrying the weight of it forever. For decades, Henry didn't talk about it. How do you explain to your neighbors that you drank water from a grave? How do you explain the sound of a friend dying in a barn? He kept these stories locked away, locked in his own mind until the 50th anniversary of D-Day when he finally began to speak. Henry's story reminds us that the history we learn in schools is the sanitized version. We learn about arrows on a map and treaties signed in rail cars. We rarely learn about the taste of flower water in a cemetery or the decision to pick up a 2x4 to fight for your life. Whatever it took, that was the only rule Henry Langrehr lived by. And because he did, we know his story today, a reminder of the unbreakable, terrifying resilience of the human spirit. If you want to see more forgotten stories, hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment with a person or mission you think we should cover. Thank you for watching, and remember, history is larger than we could ever imagine.